Hello, I'm Ingvill Fossheim, costume designer and scenographer. First of all, I would like to express my appreciation for the team of Critical Costume 2020. Thank you for making this event happen in the extraordinary circumstances of the current pandemic. I am thankful for the opportunity to take part of this event and share some of my research with a peer community. This presentation deals with my personal artistic process of collaborating with selected cellulose-producing microbes in costume design, and some reflections on how this experience has affected my understanding of the agency of costume through materiality. The work took place in 2018 in context of my professional work as costume designer on the contemporary dance performance Post-Human Days, and as participant of the ChemArts summer school as part of my MA degree studies in costume design at Aalto University. This presentation is based on my recent MA thesis. In contemporary costume theory and practice, costume materiality has emerged as a topical focus, as has the significance of costume material and costume as material with agency. Bio-based material development is a rapidly evolving research landscape where interdisciplinary communities of practitioners explore material frontiers through the development of bio-based materials and their applications. Systems thinking, such as circular economy, are driving forces in this development. Material knowledge is a fundamental part of a costume designer's practice. Yet practice that interrogates bio-based materials and incorporates systems knowledge as part of their performance making is rare in this field at the moment. My recent MA thesis, Costume Matter, exploring microorganisms, fungi and berries as bio-based material in contemporary costume design, addressed part of this gap by presenting bio-based materials as viable material alternatives in contemporary costume design and by exploring ways to assimilate selected such materials into the complex processes of costume design and collaborative performance making. Among the bio-based materials explored were cellulose-producing microbes. I understand costume as context-specific and relational. By context-specific, I mean that costume, as a subjective creative expression, is intrinsically tied to the context of a specific live performance situation, where it, quote start, as a material performed in object, renders ideas physical and embodies thoughts, histories, states of being, and previously unimagined futures in the temporary space of their performance. Quote end. Barbieri, 2017. By relational, I wish to emphasize how the material costume is at the same time an evolving material archive of relations between the bodies, human and non-human, hands and processes that made it, the bodies that inhabit it, and the movements and environments in which it has performed before, emerging anew and differently through each experienced performance. The choice and use of materials is integral to the practice of costume. As costume designer, I frequently engage with hands-on making processes as a method to advance a design idea, and the materials I choose to handle have often been commercially produced textiles and synthetic colorants and dyes, materials well established across the costume production industry, and problematic in terms of a more sustainable, responsible costume practice. By interrogating bio-based materials and questioning how these can be part of a systems knowledge in my design process, I want to challenge this habit and encourage a more lateral material approach, exploring less conventional costume materials and processes and the agency and impact of these. A shared interest and starting point for the collective performance-making process on Post-Human Days was to read, speculate on and discuss topical feminist and new materialist writings, including contemporary philosopher and feminist theoretician Rosi Braidotti's 2013 monograph The Post-Human, and feminist thinker and historian of science Donna Haraway's 1985 essay Cyborg Manifesto, and to explore how to work with these theories in the stage situation through tools such as translation and co-resonance. The core questions of the performance were: what is a post-human subject? What does it mean to let go of anthropocentrism? The world is breaking before our very eyes, but what is this inevitable state of change? As costume designer, I wanted to bridge the costume design process and the theoretical concepts, and to align my personal creative process as a reflection of the same search that was going on through the collective performance making. Encountering samples of flexible and weirdly skin-like semi-dry microbial cellulose triggered my curiosity to explore this material further in connection to the human body and as potential costume material. I thought microbial cellulose would be an interesting conceptual choice in context of post-human days. Could the core questions of the production be translated into costumes and costume material through cellulose produced by microbes, and how? As an extension of assemblage and cyborg thinking, could these microbes be explored as biomaterial collaborators through the costume design, and in what ways? Could the framing of collaboration with the microbes allow for a different perspective for engaging with the materiality of costume, and in its extension, the material agency of a performance? I introduced the concept of microbial cellulose to the production team, and we agreed to explore the potential of this material together. So I set up a cultivation station for my microbes in the ChemArts laboratory and began the biofabrication process together with 2 different types of cellulose-producing microbial cultures. In order to understand how the microbial cellulose could be engaged with as material in costume design, I needed to learn about the technical issues involved in the cultivation, the post-cultivation processing, as well as the properties and qualities it would reveal at different stages of wetness and dryness. In order to understand how this material could interact with the human body as costume, it was necessary to do experiments on my own body to prepare for the explorations with the moving bodies of the performers, and to have sufficient time for open-ended material explorations in the rehearsals. I was amazed to discover just how rich and powerful the microbial cellulose was when engaged as costume material, and how effective the experience of handling it and of watching it on and with the human bodies was. The experiential relationship between the microbial cellulose costume and the wearer's body was also emphasized in the feedback from the performers. I found that bringing the microbial cellulose materials into the rehearsal process enabled me to develop my material understanding and the costume designs in a close material dialogue with my colleagues and the emerging performance. Immediately, when the material was worked with in the rehearsals, my collaborators found ways to engage with it that I had not foreseen, physically through improvisations, as well as through subsequent reflections and discussions. This was an important exchange informing my process. My impression is that a sense of ownership of the material was distributed within the team as a result of this practice and of this extraordinary material, and that the material itself was allowed to inform the work more broadly. An example of this was the material's capacity for transformation. During the improvisations in rehearsals, the heat and sweat of the performers' bodies affected the dryish microbial cellulose costume material. It seemed to become more flexible and strong. To me, this felt suitable in relation to the philosophical concepts informing the work. Interestingly, the wet microbial cellulose also changed in appearance during the rehearsal period. For example, dots of color appeared when other not quite invited microorganisms expressed their presence on the material. To me, these colored dots and textures resembled the natural pigmentation and variation in human skin, connecting the costume's materiality with the materiality of the performer's own body. The microbial cellulose also disintegrated, fell apart, ripped as a result of the frequent handling and the usage in rehearsals and on stage. The thinnest sheets of it would dry out during rehearsals, forming thin crust-like layers on top of the skin surface. This too was an interesting material transformation. However, the significant wear and tear meant the amount of material was reduced in quantity each time we worked with it, a challenging limitation that needed to be considered. Exploring biofabrication as part of my work demanded me to shift my perspective as costume designer and performance maker. It demanded me to rethink and critically reflect on my use and abuse, directly and or indirectly, of materials and natural resources through my praxis. Learning more about bio-based material development and systems thinking supported my understanding of material life cycles. By considering costume materiality in a circular perspective, where the material is considered a valuable resource stored in different products to be used again and again rather than wasted, the origins of the costume material itself can become an active part of a performance narrative and inform both the development and perceived value of a performance. Through this process, I learned that engaging with microbes and microbial cellulose material demands a very different set of attentions and sensitivities from me as costume designer when compared to working with more commonly available fabrics and costume production methods. At the beginning of this research, I was not familiar with these protocols, so time and space was needed to study and observe, to learn the material, and to learn from the material. By allowing for this time-consuming and also challenging process, I could develop my sensitivities and skills to open up for a material working with and a deeper material listening. My personal understanding of the complex and diverse ways in which costume materiality can be agentive was enriched by embedding the praxis into a collective performance-making process and opening up the costume thinking to peers and audiences. Microbes, as living organisms and as creators of matter and meaning, can be powerful agents to engage with in costume design. They can offer a costume's material agency exciting dramaturgical and aesthetic possibilities, as well as added value beyond the live performance. My explorations of material agency continues in my professional practice as freelance designer and as doctoral candidate with a research project Biocostume, experimental costume design with bio-based coactants, which begins this autumn at Aalto University. Also here, the microbes will take an important part. I look forward to developing this topical discourse together with the costume community, hopefully also in context of future iterations of critical costume. Thank you.